Okay, so I've showed you the form in the introduction, and then I showed you the Excel VBA in part 2, and in part 3, I took us through some of the JavaScript code, the Angular code. What I haven't shown you yet, which is the best piece of the code, is the C Sharp. And so we have some C Sharp here, and this project is an add-in, so it's an Excel add-in, and I've called the project an Excel Web Server add-in. So an add-in will compile to a DLL, and it gets registered in the registry, so when you fire up a new Excel session, you get a singleton instance of this code base. And just when you start a new add-in, an Excel add-in project, you get some standard code. These two lines come out of the box, and they are wiring up the startup and shutdown event handlers. In our startup handler, we create a new instance of web server, and then we run it. And obviously in shutdown, we just stop it. Now, the web server is a wonderful piece of code which is given to us by this guy called David. This guy has top hit for simple C# web server, and it's very useful code. He says he made it in his lunch break, which is excellent. And it uses the HTTP listener, and it will do so. It uses the HTTP listener, and it has this delegate pattern. We pass it a delegate so that when it gets a response, when it gets a request, then the delegate is executed, and the request is fulfilled. So this is a wonderful pattern, and you can see it being used here in his sample client. So in his simple response, he simply returns a string. Now, if you want to run a web server, you need a lot more than that. So, but the key significance of this, I mean, I found this, and then I thought, great, and it worked. I put it into the Excel add-in, and it worked. And I thought, this is amazing. But obviously, I need a lot of work in order to beef it up into a proper web server. So, but the key magic here is that he has he's got a thread pool, and that's what's required for a web server. He has a thread pool, and so we don't have to worry about any VBA multi-threading, which isn't possible. We're not allowed to multi-thread in VBA, although we can interact with multi-threaded components. So we can make Excel VBA look as responsive as if it was multi-threaded. But anyway, that's enough of that code. We have to go over to here. So let's look at the web server here. So my function delegate is a lot more complicated. So we have a request parameter, and then we got a load of dictionaries. You have seen some of these dictionaries earlier. In fact, you saw the dictionaries earlier in the VBA section. We'll see them again soon. But I needed to get some more parameters. So when the web server constructor is being run, we listen out for the prefixes, and we pass in the prefixes as the second parameter here. And so that's all set up, and then it says, oh, and it starts listening. So it starts listening, and when it gets what we call run here, so this comes up here. So this is David's code with the thread pool, but I've added it quite a lot. So one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted not just to be I wanted the web server to return files, because I wanted it to be a REST server. So in order to become a REST server, it requires to send back HTML and JavaScript and static files, okay, and things like that. But also it needs to be able to handle the REST server calls itself. So one of the first things we do is we try to establish if it is a file that is being requested, and if it is a file, then well, we just go in and we go read the file. So it's a file system read. There's a lot of buffer logic. So we have an output stream and we have an input stream, and that's actually really quite simple. That's actually not hugely interesting. That's actually quite simple code. So that's what happens if it's a static file. If it's not a static file, then it's the REST server. So it's a REST request. Okay, so we're going to call into our function delegate, and so we're going to pass in a request, and here are the dictionaries we're passing in. So these are, I needed to pass these in order to act as container vessels for response code, because there's a problem with application.run in the sense that we can't pass by reference. So what you do is you pass by value a container, and then you fill the container. So it calls into the VBA gateway. So let's just have a look at that. So that's a function delegate, and that gets set up. It gets set up here because we pass in this. So this is the call comes into here. So you can see you've got the request and the response header dictionaries and the response cookies dictionaries. And we return the status code in a dictionary, which may be a bit overkill, but like I say, you can't pass by reference. And so essentially, I mean, you've seen this from the other side. You've seen an Excel VBA. So I showed you in the VBA how there are some dictionaries and they're populated with tons of stuff. And actually, most of this code actually just simply does that. It simply populates the dictionary. So if it's there, if it's available, then I will copy it across. And we copy across the query string to a dictionary, or request headers. And here we see if the request has a body. So if you have a post, you have a body. And so this is some code which I found from Stack Overflow. And it gets the request because I need to pass in, because Excel VBA, it needed that byte array. You saw the byte array earlier. So we need to populate the byte array so we can pass it over. So that's what this code does. It takes it from the .NET sort of representation to something which I can pass into Excel. And we populate the cookies. And then, okay, so this is the line that calls into Excel. Because it should come as no surprise to you if you're an Excel developer. The application running is how we get the cross call. We call into the VBA code using application.run, and application as a property hangs off of globals.thisAddin. So you've seen all of these. You've seen all of these in part 2. And then we return. And controls returned, and then we go back up to here. That's where we called it, and then we just start digging out the information. We build a response, build the response headers, the cookies. There's just data, and then return, and that's it. That is it. We managed to return both static files and we managed to fulfill REST requests.